My 65th birthday turned into a shocking revelation. My millionaire son, Blaine, asked me with a beaming smile if I was enjoying the apartment he had given me. Son, I whispered, I live in a garage. At these words, greedy daughter Selena dropped her glass, and her face showed not surprise, but recognition. She knew. She knew all along. Greetings to everyone who reads my story. Share in the comments what city you are watching from so that I can see how far my confession has spread. My birthday cake was lit by the dim light of what Blaine called my apartment. 65 candles, 65 years of life. And here I was, sitting in the converted garage that still smelled faintly of motor oil and old paint. Make a wish, Mom, Blaine said, his $1,000,000 smile lighting up our makeshift dining room table set up between storage boxes. He looked so proud, so pleased with himself. His designer suit probably cost more than I spent on groceries in the last 6 months. Selena sat next to him, her manicured nails tapping impatiently against her wine glass. At 38, my daughter had perfected the art of looking beautiful while exuding cool. Her Botox kept her emotions from showing, but I could see the calculation in her eyes as she checked her phone for the third time in 10 minutes. That's beautiful, honey, I managed, forcing a smile. The concrete floor was cold beneath my feet, even through the thin rug I'd bought on sale. Thank you both for coming. Blaine reached across the table and squeezed mine. His wedding ring caught the light. It cost more than most cars. Mom, you know how much I love you. I'm so glad you're comfortable here. When I bought this place for you, I wanted to make sure you had everything you needed. The words hit me like a physical blow. Everything I need. I looked around the space that had become my world. A narrow cot pushed against the wall. A hot plate that served as my only kitchen. A portable heater that barely worked in the winter. A single window that looked out onto the alley where the garbage trucks rumbled past at 5 a.m. Blaine, I said quietly, my voice barely audible. Son, I live in a garage. The wine glass slipped from Selena's fingers, shattering on the concrete floor. Red wine splattered across the gray surface like blood. But it wasn't the broken glass that made my heart pound. It was the look that crossed her face. Not shock, not surprise, but recognition. She knew. She'd known all along. Blaine's face went white. What? No, Mom? It's an apartment, a garage apartment. It's separate from the main house, completely independent. I stood up slowly, my arthritic joints protesting. Honey, look around. Really look. I pointed to the tools hanging on the wall, left behind by the previous owner, on an oil stain on the floor that could not be removed by any amount of cleaning, at the garage door, which I had had to cover with a tapestry to block out some of the cold. Realtor, he said. Blaine's voice trailed off as his eyes took in details he'd obviously never noticed before. The exposed hot water heater in the corner, the lack of proper insulation, the single electrical outlet powering my entire existence. 3 years, I said, my voice growing stronger. I've lived here 3 years and you thought it was an apartment. Selena was picking up the broken glass, but I caught her looking furtively between Blaine and me. There was something calculating in her expression, like she was trying to figure out how to control the situation. Mom, I don't understand, Blaine said, running his hands through his perfectly coiffed hair. The ad said garage condo. The realtor showed me pictures of the converted place. You never said anything. That was the knife that went deepest. that I never said anything. For 3 years, I was grateful. Grateful that my millionaire son made sure I had a roof over my head. Grateful that I wasn't homeless at 65. I convinced myself that was enough, that I should be grateful for any bits of love and shelter my children could spare. I didn't mean to seem ungrateful, I admitted, sitting back down heavily. You were so proud when you gave me the keys. You said you'd found me the perfect place. I thought, I thought this was what you thought I deserved. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could hear Selena's quick, shallow breathing. I could see Blaine processing it all. His business mind was trying to make sense of a situation that defied logic. Heat bills, he said suddenly. I pay for heat at this address. Expensive bills. My heart sank. It's not for this place, son. There's no central heating in this space. I use this little space heater. I pointed to the pathetic device that barely warmed one corner of the garage. The bills you pay? That's for the main house. The main house? Blaine's voice was barely audible. Selena finally spoke, her voice sharp and defensive. The main house is empty, Blaine. It's been empty since Mom moved in. I thought you knew that. But I caught something else in her tone. Something that made my blood run cold. She didn't think he knew. She made sure he didn't know. Selena. Blaine turned to his sister. There was confusion and something darker in his voice. You do all the property management for me. You said you make sure Mom is comfortable. You said you check on her. My daughter stood up, brushing off her designer dress. I checked on her. She looks absolutely beautiful, doesn't she, Mom? The question hung in the air like a challenge. For 3 years, I played along with whatever story was told. I smiled and nodded and pretended that living in a garage was perfectly acceptable. I convinced myself that my children's love came with conditions, and those conditions included accepting everything they thought I was worth. But looking at Selena's face, that cold, calculating expression I'd seen too many times over the years, I realized something that shattered what was left of my heart. This was no accident. This was no misunderstanding. Selena knew exactly what she was doing. How long have you known? I asked her bluntly, my voice firmer than I felt. Knew what? But her eyes looked away from mine. How long have you known I was living in a garage while your brother thought he was paying for a real apartment? The candles on the cake had burned down to little puddles of wax. The cake remained untouched. A photograph of my grandson smiled at me from my bedside table. A boy I barely knew because visits were always difficult, according to his parents. Blaine looked at his sister now. The pieces of the puzzle finally fell into place. Selena? But I already knew the answer. I could see it in the way she squared her shoulders, preparing for battle. I could see it in the defiant tilt of her chin. She always knew, and somehow, that knowledge was exactly what she wanted. The confrontation with Selena would have to wait. When my children left that night, Blaine shocked and confused, Selena coolly collected. I found myself alone with the memories I had tried so hard to bury. I sat on my narrow cot, wrapped in a thin blanket, and allowed myself to remember, really remember, without the protective filter I'd spent years building to make the pain bearable. It all started when Blaine was 18 and Selena was 16. Harold had died 2 years ago, and the insurance money was almost gone. I was working 3 jobs, cleaning offices at night, stocking shelves during the day, and babysitting the neighbors' kids on the weekends. But it wasn't enough. It was never enough. Blaine got into Harvard, my brilliant boy, the first in our family to ever dream of it. The acceptance letter sat on our kitchen table for weeks, while I tried to figure out how to make the impossible possible. Mom, I can take out loans, he said, but I could see the worry in his eyes. He knew what debt was. He'd seen me struggle with it after my father died. No, I told him firmly. You're going to go to Harvard and graduate without owing anyone a dime. I sold the house, our beautiful family home, where I'd brought both my children home from the hospital, where Harold and I had danced in the kitchen, where we'd measured Blaine and Selena's heights on the doorframe year after year. I sold everything. The realtor called it a seller's market. But even then, after paying off the mortgage and Harold's medical bills, there was just enough left to pay for Blaine's tuition and a small apartment for Selena and me. This is temporary, I told my daughter as we packed up our lives, just until Blaine graduates and gets settled. Selena was furious. At 16, she was old enough to understand what we were losing, but not old enough to understand why. She blamed me for the sacrifice as if there weren't any other choice. All my friends live in real houses, she screamed during one of our arguments in that cramped two-bedroom apartment. I'm embarrassed to bring anyone here. I worked overtime to save money for her graduation events. Prom dress, prom photos, prom. I wanted her to have everything her friends had, even if it meant I ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner most nights. When Blaine graduated, summa cum laude, with job offers from 3 major firms, I cried tears of pure joy. All the sacrifices were worth it. My son was going to have the life I could never give him as a child. Mom, let me help now, he said, standing in our tiny living room in his graduation cap and gown. I'll make enough money to take care of both of you. And he did. Blaine's career took off like a rocket. Within 5 years, he was a partner in his firm. Within 10, he had started his own company. By the time he was 35, he was worth more money than I could have ever imagined. But somewhere along the way, Selena inserted herself between us. It was subtle at first. She moved to the same city as Blaine after college, taking a job in marketing that paid well but never seemed to satisfy her expensive tastes. She began handling the family logistics for her busy brother. Blaine is so overworked, she told me during our phone calls. I help him manage everything so he doesn't have to worry about the details. Those details, I now realized, included me. When I started having trouble paying my rent, Selena was the one who suggested I might need something more appropriate for a woman your age, Mom. When I mentioned that I was having trouble affording my medication, Selena assured me she'd talk to Blaine about it. When I expressed how lonely I was living alone for the first time in my life, Selena promised to find a solution that worked for everyone. The solution was the garage. Blaine found you the perfect place, Selena announced when she arrived at my old apartment with paperwork and a set of keys. It's in a great neighborhood, and the best part is it's completely taken care of. No rent, no utilities to worry about. He's got it all taken care of. I was so grateful, so touched that my successful son was thinking of me, making sure I was safe in my old age. When Selena took me to see the place, she gave me a quick tour, pointing out the charming brick walls and convenient location. It's perfect for you, Mom, she said. Simple, easy to maintain, and Blaine is so happy he can do it for you. I trusted her. Why not? She was my daughter. But now, sitting in this garage at 65, I saw the pattern so clearly. Every time Blaine tried to do more for me, and I was now sure he did, Selena was there to manage the situation, to filter his good intentions through her own agenda. The expensive heating bills he mentioned, the ones that went to the main house that sat empty. Selena told him I lived in the main house. She pocketed the money that was meant to pay for my care. My phone buzzed. A text from Blaine. Mom, I need to figure out what happened. Can we talk tomorrow? Before I could respond, another text came through. It was from Selena. I hope you're happy. You've really upset Blaine with all your drama. My drama. Living in a garage for 3 years is drama. I put my phone down and walked over to the small mirror I had hung on the wall next to my makeshift sink. The woman looking back at me looked to be over 65. Her gray hair was thin and poorly trimmed. I did it myself to save money. Her clothes were clean but worn. Her face bore the marks of someone who had spent years worrying about everyone but herself. But her eyes had finally seen the light. For 3 years, I told myself that this was temporary, that Blaine was busy building his empire and would eventually notice that something was wrong, that Selena was simply looking out for her brother's best interests, that I should be grateful for any shelter and support I received. I was living a story that wasn't true, a story where my daughter helped coordinate my loving withdrawal, where my son provided generously for me according to his understanding of my needs, where I gracefully accepted the natural order of aging and dependency. The real story was uglier and more complicated. It was a story where one child's resentment festered for decades, where manipulation was disguised as family management, where a mother's unconditional love met with calculated exploitation. But it was also a story where the truth finally came out. And the truth, I began to understand, was the first step towards something I hadn't felt in years. Pa. My phone buzzed again. Blaine, I'll be there tomorrow morning. We need to fix this. I smiled for the first time in months. Yes, we absolutely needed to fix this, but maybe not in the way he imagined. Blaine arrived at 8 a.m., looking like he hadn't slept. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, and his expensive clothes looked rumpled, as if he had thrown them on without his usual care. He stood in the doorway of my garage, really seeing it for the first time. "Oh my God, Mom," he whispered, looking around at the space heater, the hot plate, the narrow cot. How could I not know? I poured him coffee from the small pot I'd managed to make on my hot plate. It wasn't very good coffee, the cheapest I could afford, but he drank it without complaint, sitting on the folding chair that was my only furniture besides the cot. "You trusted Selena to handle things," I said simply. "And she did. Just not the way you thought. But the bills, I paid for the heat, the electricity, the upkeep. Where did that money go?" I spent the night thinking about that question. "The main house? The one that sat empty while I lived here? Selena told you I lived in the main house, didn't she?" Blaine nodded slowly. "She said you preferred having your own space, that you liked your independence. She said the garage apartment was just extra storage for you." My heart ached for him. My son, for all his business success, had been duped as skillfully as I had been. She was managing your generosity, son, saving your good intentions and redirecting them. But why? The pain in his voice was real. Why would she do that? Before I could respond, we heard a car door slam outside. Through the small window, I saw Selena's BMW parked behind Blaine's car. She had arrived to fix the situation. "Blaine, are you there?" Her voice carried that false sweetness she used when she needed something. "I brought breakfast." She walked in, carrying an expensive bag from a high-end bakery, wearing a cream cashmere coat that probably cost more than I spent on food in 3 months. Her smile faltered when she saw us sitting together, serious and quiet. Well, this looks tense, she said, forcing a laugh. I thought we could all get some breakfast and clear up this stupid misunderstanding. Sit down, Selena, Blaine said, his voice colder than I'd ever heard it. She perched on the edge of my cot, carefully smoothing my coat out so it didn't touch the rough blanket. Look, I know Mom was a little emotional last night, but you know how she is. Sometimes she overreacts when she wants attention. The casual cruelty of the words took my breath away, but Blaine's reaction was swift and sharp. Exaggerating? He glanced around the garage. She lived in the garage for 3 years, Selena. The garage? While I was paying for her to live in the house. Selena's mask slipped for a moment, revealing something cold and calculating beneath. The main house needed work, a lot of work. I didn't want to burden you with all the details, so Mom stayed in the converted space while we did the work. What repairs? Blaine demanded. Plumbing, electrical, foundation issues, you know how old houses are? I watched my daughter lie with the ease of years of practice. And suddenly, I understood. This wasn't just about money or property management. It was about something much deeper. Show him the house, Selena, I said quietly. Her head snapped toward me. What? Show your brother the house he paid for. Let him see these extensive renovations. Mom, that's not necessary. Show me the house. Blaine stood up, and I saw the businessman in him awaken. The man who had built an empire by seeing through people's lies and manipulations. 20 minutes later, we were standing in front of the main house. It was a beautiful property in a prestigious area, exactly the kind of place a successful son would want his elderly mother to live. Blaine had chosen well. He used his key to open the front door, and we entered the house, which was not only immaculately maintained, but also beautifully furnished. The hardwood floors gleamed. Fresh flowers sat on polished countertops. The kitchen was modern and fully equipped. Upstairs, I could see through the open doors into cozy bedrooms with quality furniture. This is where you thought I lived? I said to Blaine, watching his face as the reality sank in. But where? His voice trailed off as he opened the refrigerator. It was completely stocked with expensive food, fresh vegetables, premium meats, imported cheeses. Enough food to last a family for weeks. Selena, he said, turning to our daughter. Who lives here? I already knew the answer. I'd suspected it for months, but now I was sure. Me, Selena said, lifting her chin defiantly. Sometimes, when I need space, when Marcus and I are having problems. Marcus, her husband of 15 years, worked in finance and made a good income, but nothing like Blaine's wealth. You lived in the house I bought for Mom. Blaine's voice was deadly quiet. I kept it. Someone had to make sure it was properly cared for. Mom couldn't handle a place that big, so you decided she should live in the garage? It's an adequate space for one person, and she seemed fine with it. The lie was quickly falling apart, but Selena wasn't giving up. If anything, she was doubling down on her bets, as if her best defense was an aggressive offense. You want to know the truth? She said, her voice rising. Okay. Mom was a burden for years. Always something needed. Always some kind of crisis. I protected you from all of that, Blaine. I took care of her so you could focus on your business. Protected me? Blaine looked stunned. Yeah. You think it was easy? Dealing with her constant complaints, her doctor's appointments, her medication issues, her loneliness. I did all of that so you wouldn't have to. I looked at my daughter, finally seeing her clearly. You were intercepting, I said. the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. When Blaine tried to call me directly, when he tried to visit, when he wanted to do more for me, you were interfering. Selena's silence was answer enough. A Christmas present, Blaine said suddenly. I ordered you an expensive heating system last year. I told Selena to install it here. You never mentioned that you got it. Because I never got it. I looked around the house that had been meant for me, with its perfect climate control and modern conveniences. Where is she, Selena? Mom's place didn't need this level of heating, Selena said quickly. So I installed it here for her to use when she came over. When she came over? Blaine's voice wavered. This is supposed to be her house. But I was thinking about all the other things that had never occurred to me. The care packages Blaine mentioned, the medical professionals he said he had made appointments with, the grocery delivery service he thought he had arranged for me. They all went through Selena. All of it had been redirected, minimized, or simply appropriated by her. How long? I asked her. How long have you been stealing from both of us? I didn't steal anything, she snapped. I was an efficient manager of the family resources. Mom doesn't need much, and you have more money than you know what to do with. Blaine, I made sure nothing went to waste. The word hit me like a slap. Wasted. That was how she felt about caring for her own mother. What a waste of resources. Blaine walked to the window, looking out at the garden, which was obviously being tended to. Probably a service he paid for, thinking his mother was enjoying the flowers. I need to understand something, he said without turning around. Have you ever told your mother about the trust fund? The air left my lungs. What trust fund? Selena blanched. The one I set up 3 years ago. Blaine continued, still looking out the window. 50,000 a year for my mother's expenses and health care. I asked you to explain to her, to help her access this money. Selena, please tell me what you told her about the trust fund. The silence continued until it became deafening. And in that silence, I finally understood the full scope of what my daughter had done to me. She hadn't just stolen my home. She hadn't just isolated me from my son. She stole the 3 years of financial security Blaine had intended for me, leaving me to live on my small social security pension while she lived in luxury. Selena, Blaine's voice was barely contained. Where's the money? Where's the money, Selena? Blaine's question hung in the air like a blade about to fall. My daughter stood frozen in the middle of the beautiful house that was supposed to be mine. Her face changed, showing defiance, fear, calculation, and finally, trapped rage. You don't understand the expense of running all this, she said, gesturing wildly around the room. Housekeeping, utilities, property taxes, coordinating care for mom. Do you have any idea how much time I spend on her medical appointments, her prescriptions, her... I cut her off, my voice steady despite the earthquake going on in my chest. Just stop lying. Selena turned to me. Are you calling me a liar after everything I've done for this family? What medical appointments? I asked. I haven't seen a doctor in over a year because I couldn't afford the copay. What prescriptions? I've been cutting my pills in half to make them last longer. What care coordination, Selena? The color drained from her face, but she recovered quickly. You never told me you were having trouble paying. If you just communicated better. I told you. The memories came flooding back with crystal clarity. I called you last winter when I couldn't afford my blood pressure medication. You said you'd talk to Blaine about it. I texted you when the heater broke and I was freezing. You said you'd figure it out. I asked for help with groceries the week my social security check was late. You said the family was going through a tough financial time. Blaine made a sound like he'd been punched. A tough financial time. Selena, I gave you access to an emergency fund specifically for mom's needs. $25,000, renewed annually. That money was set aside for real emergencies. Selena said desperately, not for mom's every little complaint. Every little complaint. I stared at my daughter, seeing the stranger. Freezing in the winter is a little complaint. Not being able to afford heart medication is a little complaint. You're being dramatic, Mom. You always were dramatic when you wanted attention. The casual cruelty of it was breathtaking. But what broke my heart wasn't the words themselves. It was the realization that this was how she had always seen me, as a burden, as an inconvenience, as someone whose needs were automatically suspect, whose suffering was a performance. Blaine pulled out his phone and started calling. First his accountant, then his lawyer, talking in low, clipped tones about financial audits and trust fund management. Selena's courage began to crumble. You can't do this to me, she hissed at me while Blaine was on the phone. I'm your daughter. Family doesn't break up family over money. You're right, I said quietly. Family doesn't. But you stopped being my family the day you decided I was worth less than the money earmarked for my care. I kept you safe. I gave you a place to live. You act like I threw you out on the street. You kept me in the garage, Selena, while you lived in my house, using my money and telling your brother I was fine. I paused, studying her face. But that's not even the worst of it, is it? She froze. The worst part is that you liked it. You liked having that power over me. You liked knowing that every time Blaine asked about me, you could control the story. You could decide how much love and care I deserved. That's not true. But there was no conviction in her voice. Did you? When I called you, crying from loneliness, did you tell Blaine? When I asked if he could come over, did you pass on a message? When I wondered why he seemed distant, did you explain that you checked all our messages? Blaine ended his calls and turned to face us. His face was stony, but I could see the pain in his eyes. The trust fund is depleted, he said. Every penny plus the emergency fund and the medical bill. It was used appropriately, Selena said, but her voice was shaking now. For what? Designer clothes, cars, vacations. Blaine's voice was getting louder. Mom was living on $800 a month in Social Security while you were spending $50,000 a year for her care. I have expenses too. I have family obligations. You have more money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes. And you want to envy me? Envy you? Blaine exploded. You stole from our mother. You let her live in poverty while you lived on money meant for her. She doesn't need much, Selena screamed back. Look at her. She lives perfectly well simply. She doesn't need designer furniture, expensive food, or fancy medical care. Some people are just unpretentious. The words hit me like physical blows. Low maintenance. As if my decades of sacrifice, the years of putting my children's needs above my own, were proof that I simply needed less. As if my quiet acceptance of whatever crumbs they offered were proof that I was inherently content with less love, less care, less dignity. Go away. My voice was so quiet that they both stopped arguing and stared at me. Selena, get out of my house. Your house? She laughed, but it sounded hysterical. This isn't your house. This is Blaine's house. Everything here belongs to Blaine. Actually, Blaine said, his voice deadly calm. As of today, ownership will be transferred to Mom, along with full access to all the accounts that should have been hers from the start. Selena's face went white. You can't do this. I have nowhere else to go. Marcus and I broke up. I have nowhere to go. You should have thought of that before stealing from a man who sacrificed everything for you. I watched my daughter come to grips with the reality of her situation. For the first time in years, she had no leverage, no way to manipulate the narrative. She was about to lose everything she'd taken from me, and she knew it. That's when she showed me who she really was. Okay, she said, her voice turning vicious. You want to know the truth? I'm glad I kept you away from Blaine. You'd be calling him constantly, demanding his attention, making him feel guilty for living a successful life. You're needy and pathetic, and you suck the life out of everyone around you. Those words were meant to destroy me. And maybe 3 days ago they would have. But sitting in that beautiful house, finally realizing that my son had tried to love me well, that my suffering was created by my own daughter's greed and cruelty, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: clarity. You're right about one thing, I said, standing up. I'm needy. I need respect. I need honesty. I need to be treated like a human being who deserves basic dignity. And since you can't provide any of that, you're right. We're done. Selena stared at me as if I were a stranger. In a way, I was. The woman who'd accepted crumbs and called them kindness was gone. In her place was someone who finally understood her own worth. I want you out of this house by the end of the week, I continued, and I never want to see you again. Mom, you don't mean that. I'm your daughter. No, I said, feeling the truth sink into my bones. A daughter doesn't do what you did. You're a stranger who shares my DNA. She looked to Blaine for support, but found none. Her brother looked at her as if he'd never seen her before. Blaine, you can't let her do this to me. I'm your sister. And she's my mother, he said quietly. The mother who sold her house to send me to college. The mother who worked 3 jobs to make sure we had everything we needed. The mother who deserved better from both of us. Selena's composure finally crumbled completely. This is all her fault, she screamed, pointing at me. She made herself a martyr, always sacrificing, always suffering. She made us feel guilty for having a good life. She did it herself. The accusation hung in the air, and I realized there was some truth to it, which made it even more painful. I had sacrificed everything for my children. I had prioritized their happiness over my own well being. I had taught them, through my actions, that my needs were less important than theirs. But that didn't justify what Selena had done with that lesson. Instead of feeling grateful or protective, she had felt entitled. She decided that since I always gave more than I received, I should continue to expect less. You're right, I said, surprising her. I did teach you that my needs didn't matter, but you had a choice in what to do with that knowledge. You could have tried to give back. You could have made sure I was provided for in my old age, just as I took care of you in your youth. I walked to the window, looking out at the garden I'd been forced to tend for 3 years. Instead, you decided that my willingness to sacrifice meant I deserved to sacrifice forever. When I turned around, Selena was crying, but they were tears of anger, not remorse. I'm going to contest the transfer of ownership, she said. I'm going to prove that you're incompetent, that you need management. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. Blaine stepped forward. For the first time since we'd entered the house, he looked dangerous. If you try to hurt her in any way again, you'll learn how much power money really brings. Don't test me, Selena. My daughter looked between us, seeing something that made her back away. Then she grabbed her purse and headed for the door. It's not over, she said. But as I watched her go, I knew it was finally over for me. 2 weeks after Selena stormed out of what was now officially my home, I sat in the kitchen I'd only dreamed of, unpacking boxes of my stuff that Blaine had moved in from the garage. The contrast was surreal. From a stovetop and mini fridge to a full kitchen with granite countertops and professional grade appliances. But the biggest change wasn't my living situation. It was my relationship with my son. Blaine had taken a leave of absence from his company, something I never imagined. He came every day, sometimes just to check in, sometimes to help with practical matters like updating my address with doctors and government agencies. We were learning to be a family again without Selena's interference. I keep thinking about how many times I should have come over, he said that morning, sitting across from me at breakfast. How many times I called Selena instead of calling you directly. You trusted your sister? I told him. It's not a character flaw, but I should have realized something was wrong. The fact that you never asked for anything, never complained, never seemed to need help, that should have been a red flag. I understood his guilt, but I also understood something he didn't yet. Son, I trained you both to see me this way. For years, I made sure you knew that I could handle anything, that I didn't need help, that your success was more important than my comfort. He looked up from his coffee. What do you mean? I've been thinking about this ever since the confrontation with Selena. How my own behavior patterns contributed to the situation I found myself in when you were in college, working so hard to keep up your grades and build your future. What did I tell you when you called home worried about money? Blaine thought for a moment. You told me you were doing fine, that I shouldn't worry about anything at home. And when Selena was struggling early in her career, spending more than she made, what did I do? You helped her. You said it was temporary. And when you became successful and wanted to help me, what message did I send? He was silent for a long moment. That you don't really need help, that you're proud of being able to handle things on your own. I nodded. I taught you both that love meant not burdening me with your problems and not burdening you with mine. I thought I was a good mother, raising you to be independent and strong. But Selena took that and twisted it. She did. But I laid the groundwork myself. I reached across the table and took his hand. I'm not saying this to make you feel better about what happened. I'm saying this because I don't want to make the same mistakes in the future. We were interrupted by the doorbell. Through the front window, I could see a young woman with dark hair nervously shuffling an envelope from hand to hand. When I opened the door, she introduced herself as Jennifer Martinez, a private investigator. Mrs. Holloway, I'm working on a case involving your daughter, Selena. Can I come in? Blaine and I exchanged glances. We haven't heard from Selena since she left, although I expected some kind of response. Jennifer sat in the living room, refusing my offer of coffee. I was hired by Marcus Chen, Selena's husband. He's filing for divorce, and he believes she's hiding assets. What does this have to do with us? Blaine asked. Jennifer opened her envelope and pulled out a stack of papers. During our investigation into Mrs. Chen's finances, we discovered some irregularities that I thought you should be aware of. She spread the papers across my coffee table. Bank statements, investment account statements, property records. This is a savings account in your name, Mrs. Holloway, she said, pointing to one statement. You know about it. I looked at the document. It showed an account with almost $40,000 in it. I've never seen that. It was opened 3 years ago, with Selena listed as the second account holder. There have been regular deposits, but no withdrawals. Blaine leaned forward. What deposits? The Social Security overpayments, Medicare reimbursements, and apparently life insurance proceeds. My heart stopped. What insurance policy? Jennifer pulled out another document. Your husband, Harold, had a small policy through his job. When he died, there must have been some confusion about the beneficiary information. The insurance company tried to find you for 3 years. I stared at the papers, confused. But Harold died 15 years ago. His life insurance paid out then. That's how I've been able to hold on this long. It was a separate policy, Jennifer explained, a pension benefit that continued after his death. The company merged with another insurer, and in the transition, your file was lost. When they finally found you, the address they had was out of date. So where did the money go? To this account, which was opened by someone posing as your legal representative. Jennifer's voice was careful, professional. The signature cards have Selena's name on them. Blaine looked through the documents, his face growing darker with each passing minute. She saved the money for Mom for 3 years. It seems so. But here's the interesting thing, Jennifer continued. She never touched it. Each deposit just sat there, earning interest. I struggled to process this information. Why would she save the money but not use it? I think, Jennifer said softly, she was setting it aside for something specific. Based on some of the documents we found in her personal papers, it appears she was planning to eventually claim that you were incompetent and needed a guardian. The presence of untouched funds in an account she controlled would support the theory that she was responsibly managing your affairs. The room spun around me. It would be one thing to discover that Selena had been stealing from accounts set up by Blaine, another to learn that she had been systematically intercepting money that rightfully belonged to me, creating a case to declare me incompetent. She was going to send me to the nut house, I said, the pieces falling into place. It's possible, Jennifer admitted. She's documented what she calls troubling behavior, isolation, poor decision-making, inability to manage finances on her own. Blaine stood up abruptly, pacing toward the window. The garage. She kept Mom in the garage to create evidence that she couldn't live on her own. And my dependence on her for everything, I added, feeling sick. Every time I called her for help with medical appointments or financial issues, she documented it as evidence that I was becoming dependent and confused. Jennifer nodded. Based on what Mr. Chen shared with me, there are also recordings of conversations with elder law attorneys and private care facilities. The manipulation was far deeper than I realized. Selena wasn't just stealing from me. She was systematically building a case to take away my freedom entirely. But she never followed through. Blaine said. He turned to us. No, Jennifer agreed. And based on the timeline, I think I know why. She pulled out another document. Selena hired a private investigator 3 months ago to investigate your finances, Mr. Holloway. I believe she was trying to determine how much control she could have over your assets if she became your mother's legal guardian. Blaine froze. Was she planning on taking my money too? Possibly. In many states, if a parent is declared incompetent and their adult child becomes the guardian, that guardian can make claims against other family members for ongoing support. I sat back in my chair, devastated. My daughter wasn't just stealing from me. She was planning to steal my independence, my autonomy, maybe even my relationship with my son. And she'd been plotting this for years. Every interaction carefully calculated to support her ultimate version. There's more, Jennifer said. The reason Mr. Chen hired me in the first place? Selena was funneling money into accounts under her maiden name. Under your maiden name, Mrs. Holloway, she was creating a financial profile that would support the claim that she had been acting as your financial representative all along. Identity theft, Blaine said grimly. Among other things, Mr. Chen believes she was planning to claim significant assets as part of the divorce settlement. Assets that she claimed were hers as your guardian and representative. I looked around the beautiful house, which I only now realized was truly mine, thinking of the garage where I'd spent 3 years, believing I was being taken care of. The scale of Selena's plans was breathtaking in its cruelty. What now? I asked. Well, Jennifer said, the 40,000 in that account is yours, and based on what we found, Selena could be facing criminal charges for elder abuse, identity theft, and fraud. Blaine sat down next to me again. Mom, it's your decision, but she needs to face consequences for what she did. I thought of the woman who raised me to believe that family loyalty meant accepting any treatment. I thought of the years I'd spent justifying Selena's coldness, telling myself she was just being practical, just protecting her brother. I thought about the life I could have had these last 3 years if I had received the money that was rightfully mine, the medical care I went without, the dignity I had lost. And I thought of the other older people who might not have a son like Blaine to stick up for them. The other mothers who might be locked in garages or worse, while their children systematically strip them of resources and autonomy. I want to press charges, I said quietly. All of them. Jennifer nodded and made a note. There's something else you should know. Based on the documents we found, you weren't her only target. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? She was texting elder law attorneys about other elderly clients. I think she was planning to expand this kind of operation. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. My daughter hadn't just betrayed me. She was planning to make a business out of exploiting vulnerable seniors. But as shocking as the revelation was, it also gave me something I hadn't expected. Purpose. For the first time in years, I had something important to do, something that mattered beyond my own survival. I was going to make sure Selena could never do to anyone else what she had done to me. 6 months later, I stood in my garden, pruning the wilted roses I had finally had the chance to plant. The morning was crisp and clear, and the satisfaction of working the dirt under my fingernails felt like a luxury I had forgotten existed. The trials proceeded quickly once the evidence was presented. Selena pleaded guilty to elder financial abuse, identity theft, and fraud. She received 3 years in prison and full restitution, not just to me but to 2 other elderly clients she targeted through her correspondence with unscrupulous care providers. The judge was especially harsh in her sentences. This defendant didn't just steal money, she stole dignity, autonomy, and peace of mind from vulnerable people who trusted her. I attended the sentencing hearing not out of vengeance, but because I needed to see the end of the story. Selena looked older, somehow smaller in her orange jumpsuit. She glanced at me once during the proceedings, and I saw something in her eyes that might have been regret, but it might also have been anger at being caught. I nodded once at her, not in forgiveness, but more in recognition. She was still my daughter in the biological sense, but the relationship I had spent 65 years trying to build was truly over. The hardest part wasn't the trial, or even the public attention the case brought. The hardest part was learning to live without the constant anxiety that had defined my existence for so long. For years, I lived with the fear that I was one crisis away from homelessness, one medical emergency away from bankruptcy. Even when I was theoretically being cared for, I felt the insecurity of my situation in my bones. Now that my own financial resources were secured and my relationship with Blaine was restored to an honest basis, I was learning what it meant to plan longer than just the next month. I enrolled in a master gardening program at a local community college. I joined a book club at the library. I even started dating, which felt both terrifying and wonderfully normal at 65. Robert was a widower I'd met in a gardening class, a retired teacher with gentle hands and a dry sense of humor. We moved slowly, drank coffee after class, walked through the botanical gardens, shared stories about our children and grandchildren. Yes, grandchildren. This was perhaps the most unexpected gift of this whole ordeal. Blaine had been married for 8 years to a woman named Sarah, whom I had met only briefly at their wedding. Another interaction that had been managed and minimized by Selena. Sarah was a pediatric nurse with warm brown eyes and an easy laugh. She was also 7 months pregnant with my first grandchild. I'm so sorry we didn't include you more, Sarah said during one of our dinner introductions. Selena always said you preferred your independence, that family gatherings were overwhelming. I started to defend myself. My old habit of shielding everyone from discomfort, but Blaine gently cut me off. Selena lied a lot. He said simply, "We're starting over." And we did. Blaine and Sarah included me in everything now. Doctor's appointments, baby shopping, nursery planning. I was learning things about my son's life that I had never been allowed to before. His struggle with work-life balance, his excitement about becoming a father, his regrets about the years we lost to Selena's manipulations. I keep thinking about all the conversations we should have had. He told me one afternoon, as we were putting together the crib in what would become the nursery, all the times I should have called you directly instead of calling Selena. We're talking now, I reminded him. And so we talked. The doorbell rang, interrupting my gardening thoughts. I brushed the dirt off my hands and went to answer it, expecting Robert to bring the Chinese takeout we had planned for lunch. Instead, I found a young woman holding a baby carrier. "Mrs. Holloway, I'm Amanda Chen, Marcus's sister." My heart sank. Marcus was Selena's ex-husband, and I had heard in court that they had a small child. "This is Emma," Amanda continued, adjusting the carrier so I could see the sleeping baby inside. "She's your granddaughter." I stared at the girl, seeing traces of Selena in her features, but also something softer, more innocent. Emma was maybe 18 months old, with dark curls and chubby cheeks. "Marcus wanted you to meet her," Amanda explained. "He said, you have a right to know her, no matter what happened to Selena." My throat went dry. "How is she?" "Emma's fine. Marcus has full custody now. He's a good father." Amanda paused. "He wanted me to give you this too." She handed me an envelope with my name written on it in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. "Can I hold her?" I asked. Amanda smiled and carefully lifted Emma from the carrier. The baby was awake when I picked her up, her dark, serious eyes studying my face. "Hello, sweetheart," I whispered. "I'm your grandmother, Janine." Emma considered this information seriously, then reached out to touch my face with one small hand. Later, after Amanda and Emma had left, with promises of future visits, I sat in my living room reading Marcus's letter. "Dear Mrs. Holloway, I want you to know that I had no idea what Selena was doing to you. If I had, I would have intervened immediately. I'm writing to ask if you would be willing to be a part of Emma's life. She deserves to know her grandmother, and you deserve to know her. Selena will have supervised visits once she's released." But I want Emma to know that she has family members who will treat her with kindness and respect. I also want you to know that some of the things Selena did to you now make more sense in light of her treatment of Emma and me. She was controlling, manipulative, and emotionally abusive. I spent years justifying her behavior by telling myself that she was just stressed or overwhelmed. Emma and I are in therapy together, learning healthier patterns of behavior. If you agree, we would be happy for you to be a part of this healing process. Sincerely, Marcus. I folded the letter, thinking of patterns and cycles, of how damage is passed down through generations until someone decides to break the chain. Selena had inherited my self sacrificing streak, but she had twisted it into something self serving. She had learned to manipulate others' guilt and loyalty to exploit the very qualities that should have made her a better person. But Emma was not to inherit any of this. Emma could grow up knowing that she was valued for who she was, not for what she could give. She could learn that love did not require sacrifices of dignity or autonomy. That night, Blaine and Sarah came over for dinner. Sarah was moving more slowly now, her pregnancy entering its final stages, but she insisted on helping me cook. I got some exciting news today, I told them as we prepared the vegetables for the stir fry. I have another grandchild. I told them about Amanda's visit, about Emma, about Marcus's letter. What do you think? Sarah asked softly. I thought about the question as I chopped carrots. I hope, I said finally, that little girl deserves better than the inheritance Selena would have left her. Maybe I can help with that? Blaine nodded. You're good at raising children who love. I made mistakes with you and Selena, I said. I taught you both that my needs don't matter. Selena used that lesson to justify cruelty. You used it to justify distance. Neither response was healthy. So, what will you teach Emma? Sarah asked. I smiled, thinking of the little girl's serious eyes, her careful study of my face. That she's valuable, just the way she is. That the people who love her will always be there for her. That asking for help is not a weakness, and giving help is not a sacrifice. It's just love in action. After dinner, we sat on the back porch watching the sunset. Sarah put her feet up on the table, one hand on her round belly. Blaine was reading work emails, but every few minutes he put his phone down to join in our conversation. I was thinking about forgiveness, I said suddenly. They both looked at me. Not forgiveness for Selena, I clarified. I'm not there yet, and I may never be there, but forgiveness for myself. For what? Blaine asked. For all the years I believed I was worth less, for teaching my children that love meant accepting no matter what, for not fighting harder when I knew something was wrong. Sarah reached out and took mine. You survived. That's enough. But I knew it was more than that. I had done more than just survive. I had finally learned to thrive. At 65, I was discovering what it was like to live without fear, to make choices based on what I wanted, not what others expected of me. The garden I'd planted was now blooming, roses, lavender, and the herbs I used in my cooking. The house felt like home in a way it never had when I thought I was borrowing it. I had enough money in my bank account for both the necessities and the little luxuries: books, good coffee, flowers for the table. But the real luxury was peace, the absence of that constant, low level anxiety that had been humming in the background of my life for so long, knowing that I was safe, that I valued myself, and that I was free to make my own choices. When we said goodbye that night, Blaine hugged me tightly. I love you, Mom, he said. I should say that more often. You say it now, I said. That's what matters. After they left, I walked through my house, turning off the lights and checking the locks. Security habits I was still learning to trust. In my bedroom, I found a small framed photograph that Blaine had given me. A picture of me holding him as a newborn, my face aglow with the joy of a new mother. For years, I had looked at pictures like these and seen only future victims, a long road of putting my children's needs above my own. Now I saw something different. I saw a woman capable of intense love, with strength she never knew she had, who would survive whatever came next. I was that woman still, 65, free for the first time in decades, with grandchildren to love, a garden to tend, and a future that was all mine. It took me a lifetime to realize that I was worth fighting for, but I realized it in time for it to matter. And that, I thought, as I turned off my bedside lamp, was enough. Now I wonder what you would do if you were in my shoes. Have you ever been in a similar situation? Leave a comment below. In the meantime, I'm leaving two more stories on the last screen that are channel favorites and will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching to the end.